1st, 1923 in Sumner, Florida, 22-year-old Fannie Taylor, a white girl, was heard screaming inside of her home by a neighbor who found Taylor covered in bruises and claiming a black man entered her house and assaulted her. Fannie's husband, James Taylor, escalated the situation by organizing an angry mob of white citizens, residents from neighboring counties, and almost 300 Ku Klux Klan members who were in Gainesville for a KKK rally to hunt down the accused. After scouring the area woods searching for any black man they could find, law enforcement learned that a black prisoner named Jesse Hunter had escaped and immediately chose him as the suspect. Searches were led by dogs to the home of Aaron Carrier in Rosewood. Carrier was the nephew of Sarah Carrier, who did the laundry for the Taylor family. The white men dragged Carrier out of his home, tied him to a car, and dragged him to Sumner, where he was cut loose and beaten. Sheriff Walker intervened, putting Carrier in his car and driving him to Gainesville, where he was placed under the protective custody of the sheriff there. Another mob showed up at the home of blacksmith Sam Carter, torturing him until he admitted that he was hiding Hunter and agreed to take him to the hiding spot. Carter led them into the woods, but when Hunter failed to appear, someone in the mob shot him. His body was hung on a tree before the mob moved on. The sheriff's office allegedly attempted and failed to dismantle the angry white mobs and advised black workers to stay inside their places of employment for safety. As many as 25 people, mostly children, took refuge in the home of Sarah Carrier on the night of January 4th when armed white men surrounded her home, believing Jesse Hunter was hiding there. Sarah Carrier was shot in the head and died, as well as her son Sylvester, who was also killed by a gunshot wound defending his home. The children inside the home escaped through the back and made their way to safety through the woods, where they hid in darkness for hours. News of the standoff at the Carrier house spread, with newspapers inflating the number dead and falsely reporting bands of armed black citizens going on a rampage. Even more white men poured into the area, believing that a race war had broken out. Some of the first targets in this influx were the churches in Rosewood, which were burned down. Houses were then attacked, first setting fire to them, and then shooting people as they escaped from the burning buildings. Lexi Gordon was one of those murdered, taking a gunshot to her face as she hid under her burning house. Gordon had sent her children fleeing when white attackers approached, but suffering from typhoid fever, she stayed behind. James Carrier, brother of Sylvester and son of Sarah, did manage to get out of the swamp and take refuge with the help of a local turpentine factory manager. However, a white mob found him anyway and forced him to dig a grave for himself before murdering him. Some black women and children escaped thanks to John and William Bryce, two wealthy brothers who owned a train. Aware of the violence in Rosewood and familiar with the population, the brothers drove their train to the area and invited women and children escapees only. Many of those who fled by train had been hidden in the home of the white general store owner, John Wright, and continued to do so throughout the violence. Mobs began to disperse after several days, but on January 7th, many returned to finish off the town, burning what little remained of it to the ground except for the home of John Wright. A special grand jury and a special prosecutor were appointed by the governor to investigate the violence. The jury heard the testimonies of nearly 30 witnesses, mostly white, over several days, but claimed to not find enough evidence for prosecution. The surviving citizens of Rosewood never returned, fearful that the event would happen to them again. The story of Rosewood faded away quickly. Most newspapers stopped reporting on it as soon as the violence had ceased, and many survivors kept quiet about their experience, even to subsequent family members. It was in 1982 when Gary Moore, a journalist for the St. Petersburg Times, resurrected the history of Rosewood through a series of articles that gained national attention. The living survivors of the massacre, at that point all in their 80s and 90s, came forward, led by Rosewood descendant Arnett Doctor, and demanded restitution from Florida. The action led to the passing of a bill awarding them $2 million and created an educational fund for descendants. The bill also called for an investigation into the matter to clarify the events. Further awareness was created through John Singleton's 1997 film Rosewood, starring Ving Rhames, Don Cheadle, and John Voight, which dramatized the events for the world to see. Today, little trace of Rosewood still remains, although the house owned by John Wright's family is still standing. A historical marker on a highway is the only reminder of the tragedy that cost the families of Rosewood their whole entire lives. And if you didn't know, now you know.